Winter is upon us, which gives me less opportunity to skate and more time to delve into gear madness. If it leads to me skating better, it's okay with me, but it all started with me skating worse than I usually do. It all started last year when I got back into skateboarding. The first 2 weeks I skated my old setup from 18 years ago, and once I found out it wasn't a spur of the moment thing and how much bigger decks had gotten, I got a brand new complete. All was fine with that complete, which was an affordable skate store house brand, but after a few more months I wanted to get all the gear I actually really wanted. Thunders like I always used to skate, and a toy machine deck because that was one of the few brands still around I remember from back in the day. Once I got that setup installed, I was all excited to go skate it, and it felt very comfortable and stable at first. But once I started popping my tail, it felt terrible. It felt like I had lost my pop. And after a while I thought it was because of the wheelbase. Thunder trucks on a 14.5-inch wheelbase was a lot wider than what I was used to so far. I tried to get used to it for a few weeks, but I couldn't get there, and eventually I bought some Royal inverted kingpin trucks, which have a significantly shorter effect on the wheelbase than the Thunders do. I put them on the toy machine deck, and all of a sudden that deck was rideable, and for the Thunder trucks I bought an almost deck with a 14.25-inch wheelbase, which solved that problem too. From that moment on I got more aware of my setup. Part of it is muscle memory from back in the day, but other parts have adapted easier. Back in the day I rode way smaller decks than what's the norm now. My last deck from 18 years ago is a 7.7 inch with a 14-inch wheelbase, but these days I like to ride at least an 8.5. Also back in the day I skated my trucks really tight, probably because I had to, because those small decks from back in the day were way too small for me. These days with the bigger decks I ride my trucks a lot looser, which feels a lot nicer as well. I still like a little less concave, and I'm still experimenting with steepness. I can skate a deck with steep kicks, but it still feels a bit weird to put my foot on the edge of the tail. Skating these Surfy Royals have felt nice since day one. I did put independent original 92A bushings in them, and I also recently got a second pair of those Royals in which I put Ace hard bushings, which also work quickly. But with my Thunders, I have an issue dialing in the right bushing setup. The originals worked well at first, but eventually they blew up, started sticking and felt lifeless. Probably because they were too soft for my weight and I cranked them down a bit too much. After that I got some Bones hard bushings and Thunder 97A bushings, but they also kept sticking and felt lifeless. So I was still searching for the right bushings in those trucks. In December last year things got a bit worse again. I changed up my old deck for a fresh one, which was advertised as having a 14.25-inch wheelbase. So I put my Thunders on it, and ever since then I felt like I was skating bad. I was pulling my tricks before the pop, and the trucks felt dead and lifeless again without any bounce, and I thought I was just having a slum again. After a while I actually decided to measure the wheelbase of the deck, and it turned out to be a lot longer, 14.43 inches to be exact. So once again I put my Royals on that deck, put my Thunders back on an almost deck, and everything seemed to be fixed. Almost everything. The bushing situation with the Thunders was still there. And to make everything even more complicated, I also bought some independent Stage 11 mids, because they were on sale for 19 bucks and I had never skated indies before. But I would have to figure out where they fit in, because they also have a different effect on your wheelbase. And I started by putting them on an almost deck with a 14.25-inch wheelbase to ride my smallest wheelbase so far and see how that works out. I skated that setup for an afternoon, but it quickly turned out that wheelbase was actually a bit too small. And at this point I had also started using ChatGPT to help me guide through all the science and biomechanics of what it was doing to my setups to make sense of it all. Usually I'm not a fan of AI reliance, but I wanted to give it a shot here. My next step would be to put the indies on another toy machine deck lying around with a 14.43-inch wheelbase, which would still be the setup with the smallest wheelbase, to see if that would work. In the meantime I changed the 97A bushings in my Thunders to 94A, and I had a session to dial in both and also compare them. The indie setup still felt a bit too small. I could skate it, but my timing was off and it felt a bit too nervous. And the trucks felt nice, albeit a bit noisy. When I got them, I straight away changed the stock bushings to their Independence original 92A bushings, which I think should work. But the bushings on the Thunder still didn't really work, and I know Thunders take some time to settle in, but they weren't there yet. ChatGPT suggested that because I want more liveliness and bounce and less stickiness and stiffness out of my Thunder setup, and also because of my size and weight, I should replace the cupped top washer for a flat one, so I gave that a try. And for my indie setup, I bought a toy machine deck with a 14.53 inch wheelbase. For my next session, I was comparing both setups less because I was dialing in different things, so I didn't edit them back to back. With my Thunder setup, I was dialing in the bushings, and with my indie setup, I was seeing if the wheelbase was working. What happened here was strange. With the flat washer on the Thunders, everything felt way too loose, but I didn't want to tighten my trucks to give them a chance to break in. I could still skate the setup, but it didn't feel nice and my feet were actually hurting from trying to get the board straight. On the other hand, the indies worked great with the new deck. I felt like I had a really powerful pop and the shape of it was simply nice as well. But all of a sudden, my trucks felt like shit. They got even more squeaky and they felt stiff and rusty. So even though I now got the wheelbase on both decks right, it felt like the truck issues had swapped around. According to ChatGPT, that's a common thing with indies in the beginning, so I felt like I had to give them a bit more time. I also tried skating in the Thunder trucks with the 94A bushings and the flat washer on top, but it kept feeling off. Even when I tightened them a bit more over time, they felt a bit better, but they didn't feel like Thunders. I missed the stability. So after talking to ChatGPT once again, I put the cut washer back in on top and I had another session with both setups. My skating was a bit shit that day, but that was consistent on both setups. With only a few tweaks, I got my Thunder trucks with a new white working window and they hadn't felt this good ever since the original bushings blew up. So I had my Thunder setup dialed in, but my Indy setup was the same as before. You can hear how noisy they are in the videos and they also feel like they sound somehow. I still get a good pop and I know they can skate and feel better than I do now. But after only one session, somehow they keep sticking, feel rusty and stiff. Even when I loosen the kingpin, they feel loose, but they still feel rusty. So now my focus is solely on getting these trucks to work again. The next thing I'll do is wax the pivot cups and maybe the washers, ride them in, and see if I can get them back into functioning like they did in the beginning. Because if I do, this is going to be a great setup as well. It was a bit harder to get some footage from the session because it was a really busy Saturday afternoon at the skate park. And in my next video I will show you a longer montage and it will show why I don't usually film at the skate park in the weekends. But even though you probably couldn't hear it, the trucks were no longer squeaking. The trucks felt great again, the noise was gone and both setups are now correctly dialed in. But you might be wondering why I'm going this deep down the rabbit hole, not even a year back into skateboarding, and if AI actually helped me in the process. The reason I'm doing this is because of those few instances that I've noticed that my skating was off, and the reason each time was the combination of things that I was skating. By now I know what I can easily adapt to, but there are a few things that throw off my skating for too much, too long. And you can get used to those things, but I'm 36 now and I don't want to waste any time struggling with setups. Finding my right window and relearning everything within that window is much more effective for me at this point. Also, having different trucks that have a different effect on the wheelbase makes my deck selection a bit bigger, so I'm not stuck with a very narrow preference that's hard to find, but I have a bigger selection of decks when I need new ones. Although not all of ChatGPT's feedback and suggestions worked out for me, it did help me to establish the right playing field with a reasonable explanation without spending too much time and money on trial and error. I've gone through the same process as a guitar player without the aid of AI, and it took me 8 years and cost me a lot more money. The conclusion for now is that I know within what window I like to have my effective wheelbase, how I dial in my trucks and which trucks go with which decks. I still like to experiment with deck shapes and sizes, but at least for now I've got the fundamentals down. In the end, it all results in me skating better and focusing less on gear. And of course, this madness is really focused on gear, but I'm not doing it to find one perfect setup, but to find my playing field. All of it to focus more on skating and less on gear. And if you thought this was all about dialing in 2 setups, well, there's 2 more I'm skating. This is an 8.375 with a 14.43 wheelbase, and it has royals with ace, bushings, and this is my Polar 9-inch with a 14.5 wheelbase that has the bigger royals with independent bushings. And they also serve different purposes, but they were dialed in from the get-go. But that was a lot of madness, and I think this has been a really long video, so if you stuck to this moment, thank you very much for watching. And if you have trouble with your setup, just try using AI and see if it works for you as well.